So today we will be learning how do we create a database and a collection in MongoDB. And in the previous lecture, you must have understood the basic differences between MongoDB and the RDBMS, and also we discussed so many basic concepts. How this MongoDB came into picture. So today we shall be discussing and we will be using MongoDB shell and we will try to create a database and a collection. So in order to have a collection, we ought to have a database. And let me use my MongoDB shell to show you how do we create. So this is how our MongoDB shell looks like. So when we type a command, it says DB. So it means that currently I'm using a test DB. And if I say a command, something called as show DB, so it will list me all the DBs present over here. So now the idea is to create a database and then the collection. So let me create a database. The command use command is used to create a database in MongoDB. And suppose if I want to create a database, something called as AK Avinash Kumar, so I will say that use AK. So now it says that switched to AK, meaning that now I am under the database named AK. So when I use the command as DB, it shows that I am under AK. So now let us try to create a collection. So what is the command to create a collection? This command is pretty straightforward. DB means database dot and the collection name. The collection name, suppose if I want to create as Avinash or say Avi, and then after creating the collection I need to insert some records, right? So what do? I will be using something called as insert method here, and this method allow me to create some documents. How do I create some documents? So I'll say name. So if I say my full name as Avinash Kumar, and suppose if I want to have one more attribute, or we can say some more field and the values. So let me say my employee ID, and then suppose the employee ID is 1234, and suppose if I want to say about my salary, suppose my salary is 10k, or you can say 10,000. Now what I can see is that I have created a document, and in this document what I can see is that I have field value, or you can say key value pair, meaning that a document under the collection called as Avi will have these many attributes: name, employee ID and the salary. So now let us hit enter. So when you get this result as n inserted equals to 1, it means that your query, you have ran it completely successfully. Now obviously we may want to see that were our collection created or not. So how do we see that if my collection got created or not? So there is a command called as show collections. So it will list you all the collections under the database AK. So we have one collection that we created right now, and it is called as Avi. So now let me see that the document which I had inserted under the collection AVI is present over there or not. So how do we check that? It's very simple. db.collection name. Our collection name is AVI, and then we can use a method called as find. So it has listed my document that we created over there. Its name as Avinash K, employee ID 1234, and the salary is 10,000. And also, as we discussed in our last lecture, it says it is having something called as underscore ID. And what this ID is, we did not specify this ID explicitly, but MongoDB has created one ID for each and every document. And now if you want to see this output very clearly in a very clear manner, then there is another method, something called as pretty, that we can use, and then we can see this will have a human readable form, and then we can read it very clearly. So just to summarize, how do we create a database? By using a command called as I created database use AK, and now it says that switched to the database AK. Now I am under AK. So when I say DB, so it says that my database name is AK. So now if I want to create a collection, I have to use a command, something called as very simple command, DB, the collection name. And then if I want to insert some values, so I have specified as some attributes as name, EID and the salary. And when we get this result as n inserted equals to 1, it means that our query was successfully ran. Now if you want to list out the collections that is created under our V collection, under the database AK, then the command is show collection. So it shows that we have a collection name as Avi. Now the next is, if I want to list all the documents which is present under AVI, and the command is called, or the method what we say is find method, means please go to the database and then go to the collection AB, and under collection AV please use a method called as find. This will list you all the documents which is under collection AVI. And to have the format more clear and vivid for a reader, we use a method called as pretty. So now let us move to our next slides. Probably we discussed everything for next 2-3 slides. Let us see how far we covered. So we have discussed that how do we use command called as use command to create a database, and also we have seen that what does it mean switch to database employee DB. So let us move to the next slide. Again, we have seen that how do we create a collection and how do we insert the document into it. So this slide shows exactly what we did in our MongoDB shell right now, that how do we make use of our insert command, which says that this insert allow you to insert the document into the collection, and it is saying that 2 key value pairs have been added, and we had added 3 key value pairs, name, employee ID and the salary. This is what we have discussed already. And if we move further, so this is the output that is being trying to displayed here on the screenshot as a part of this slide, that if you perform the last operation, then you're gonna get this result. If you perform this operation, then this is the result you're gonna get. This we have already discussed using our MongoDB shell, where we have created a database name as AK and the collection name as AVI, followed by we created a document which had 3 key value pairs, the name, employee ID and the salary. So let us move to our next slides. So now we have something called as drop database. So the basic syntax for the drop database, you can see db dot drop database. So for example, let me use my MongoDB shell to depict it more clearly. So let me first list that what all the database I am having. So these are the database which is present for me right now. And suppose if you want to delete any database, and the command that we will be using to delete the database will be pretty simple. Suppose if currently I am in this database, currently I am in AK, and suppose if I want to delete this database, then I will use say simply db dot drop database and then close the braces and thus hit enter. So when you see this output as dropped AK, it says that the database AK that we have created has been dropped, or you can say it has been deleted. So now how do I check if this database was deleted or not? So in the last input what we saw, that if we are making a query of the show DBs, I could see my database as AK. Now if I run this query again, I no more see my AK database. It means that my drop database query has worked fine. So coming back to the slides. So this is what our drop database does, means you can drop a database. Now the another aspect of how you can create a collection is there is a basic syntax which says db.create collection and the name and the options. So what we can see that if regardless of the fact that if we don't use this command as a create collection, we have seen that if we specify the name of the collection that we want to create, followed by the insert method where we put our documents, then there is kind of no need of using this create collection method. But still, just for the knowledge purpose, we should understand that there is a command, something called as create collection, which is followed by after when we use our database db.create collection, and then we have to specify the name of the collection and then the options what we want to specify. So let us move to our next slides. So these are few of the optional parameters that we can use while creating a collection. While inserting the document, MongoDB first checks the size of the field, that is the capped size. Though these options are optional, but while inserting the document, MongoDB first what it does, it checks the size field of the capped collection, then it checks the max field. So now if we try to go through the syntax, then syntax is also pretty simple, like what we saw as db.create collection, and then we can say specify the name, and then we can say the cap equal to true, or we can say that something called as auto index id equals to true. This is how the optional parameters, if you want, we can specify. But an important point to be noted is that in MongoDB we don't need to create a collection, as we discussed in the last slide. So MongoDB creates collection automatically when you insert some document. These are the few of the optional parameters that we can specify every time that we need. So let us move to our next slide. Now this is what something we learned, that we can drop a database in the same manner we can drop a collection. And what you can see right now is that syntax is pretty much similar. There we had something called a drop database, and here it says something called as only drop method. So what it does is that db.collection.drop method, it will drop your collection. So just let me use my MongoDB shell to make sure that we can create a database very quickly. Suppose my database name is, again let me say again, it's AK, and then if I want to create a collection, say UV, and if I want to insert my documents, say just one, let me say as name as Yuvraj, and maybe just let me put one more, age as maybe 27, and then hit enter. So it has inserted one. So let me say this, if I can see that a collection has been created or not. I can see there is a collection called as UV. So now if we want to drop this collection, so what the command I will be using, how do I drop? So how I will be dropping this collection, the command that will be used is pretty straightforward. It will be db.collection name, and the collection name is something called as uv.drop. So it says true, means if you're getting output as a true, means that UV collection has been deleted. So how do I confirm that? It's pretty straightforward. So collections means we did not get any output. It means that the UV collection has been dropped or it has been deleted. So let us move to our next slides. Now these are the few of the data types that is supported by MongoDB. We can see something called as string, integer, we have double, we have boolean, we have arrays. It also supports timestamp, object, and there are quite a few which is also listed on the next slide. And we have something called as it will be having something called as symbol, and it also has object ID, the binary data, the regular expressions. So these are the few of the data types that is supported by MongoDB, which we will be leveraging during discussions of our intermediate phase of MongoDB, the advanced phase of MongoDB, and most importantly the aggregation framework. So let us move to our next slide. Now this is what we have discussed already, something called an insert document. So while we used our MongoDB shell, we made sure that we learned an important concept, that how do we create a collection and how do we insert a document. So basically this insert method helps us to insert a document or create a document under the collection. And also on top of that, you have another option, another method to create a document, that is called as save. How do we create? It's pretty straightforward. Instead of using insert, we can use this option save. So let us quickly jump to our next slide. So now this is what the RDBMS clause what we use and how equivalent it is in MongoDB. And this is a very important aspect to learn because we will be leveraging this concept in our advanced level of MongoDB and also in our aggregation framework. So let us try to understand what it is. So when we say operation of equality, so if we talk about the RDBMS or any SQL database, we'll say something called as whereby. But if we are using something in MongoDB, we say something called as. Now, before we move there, the equality or the better, what will be the best that we discuss right now would be to cover the two things at the same time. So let us see this one. So what it says is that less than equals, meaning that what exactly we use in our RDBMS or SQL, it says less than equal to this sign. But here what we use something called as $LTE. So one important aspect is that we will be using dollar here most of the times, and LTE means less than equal to. So if the query goes like that db.myColumn.find likes, where likes is less than equal to 50, this is how we will represent in our MongoDB or in any NoSQL database. But in RDBMS or in SQL database, we will say that whereas likes less than equals to 50. And again, now we discuss this one, is pretty simple as a less than, which says that $LT, and this is what less than. Again, something called as greater than. Greater than is GT, that is $GT. Here it says that where the like is greater than 50. So this is our SQL equivalent and this is our NoSQL equivalent, or we can say our MongoDB equivalent. Now coming back to the equality, it's pretty obvious where in the SQL we used to have something called as equal sign, but here what we say that db.myColumn.find by, we use here by tutorials, something like that, tutorials point or whatever. So these are something where clause equivalent in MongoDB what we use. So let us move to our next slides. So these are some of the MongoDB data types that is being supported, and we have also discussed this in a few of the slides back. But important thing to be noted is that these are something which you will be kind of coming across so many times when you study intermediate or the advanced level, or most importantly the aggregation framework. So these are the some of the data types that get supported by our MongoDB. This is again we discussed last time. Now coming to the next one, that is called update document. So what is this update document? So we have two mechanisms to update. First method is called as update and the other is called as save. Save we discussed in our last slide as well. And now let us try to understand what this update talks about. So when we say about this update, it means that this method, what it does, update method will update the value in the existing document. But what does this save does? So now understand this very carefully. So there is just slight difference between update and the save. What update does? Update method will update the value in the existing document, while the save method, it will replace the current document with the new one that we passed. So meaning, suppose if we have 10 documents in a particular collection, and if we want to update, then what update will do? Update will simply update the value in the existing document. But what save does? Save will replace the current document with a new one that is passed. We will be discussing all these things in our intermediate level of MongoDB. So the next one is how. This is what the syntax of update looks like. How the syntax, how we can make use of update. So we can see this very clearly that db.collectionName.update and the selection criteria. So what it shows is that if if we want to update something, if we want to update a particular field, then this syntax says that update method start from here, and then you have to specify your selection criteria and then the updated data. It's pretty straightforward. So for example, if we want to create a column, support as my column, and it has something, maybe some data in the title as maybe like reviewed by Avinash, and then what we can do that using this update method, we can change the field value by some other value. So let us move to the next slide. Again, the save that we discussed already, what exactly it does, update will, save method will replace the current document with the one which is passed as new. So when we say this syntax shows it has something called as new data, so it's pretty obvious that it is talking about something that the new data will come into picture and the older one will get removed or it will get deleted. This is what we have MongoDB save. So save and update are totally different. So let me specify the difference once again. During using update method will help us to update the value in the existing document, while the save method will help us to replace the current document with the new one that we have passed. Now the next one, we have delete document. It's again pretty much straightforward as the name suggests. So what this delete does, delete will remove, or you can say to delete a document there is a method called as remove. So what it does, it will remove the document from the existing collection. So when we say collection, I mean to say that I will be having n number of documents, and if you want to remove one document or if you want to delete a document, then we have something called as remove method. So and if we talk about the CRUD operations, the D stands for delete, right? And this is what delete corresponding to MongoDB. We have something called as R for remove method. And again the syntax is pretty much straightforward. db dot the collection name and then the remove and then the deletion criteria means like what exactly you want to delete. So it is the CRUD operation, the D stands for delete document and R is for remove here in MongoDB. So how do we use it? With the basic syntax, pretty straightforward. db.collection name, whatever collection we have. So the collection that we created last, that was something called as AK. And if you want to remove something, if you want to remove a document, then we can specify it here. So the last segment of our discussion of delete document is something called as remove only. So what does it do? So when we talk about the remove only, we can use remove method, and we want to remove, suppose if you want to remove just the first record and we can set just one parameter to be removed, then we use remove only. So how does this work? It says that db.collection name, suppose if I am saying that db. my collection name was AK, and when we say dot remove and the deletion criteria equals to comma 1, what does it mean? It specifies that what you want to delete, you have to make it as 1. Means if you are putting at 0 means you don't want to delete. If you are specifying this as 1, so it means you want to delete. So this is the basic. How do we remove it? Now, but if you want to remove all documents, meaning that if you want to remove everything, so no need to specify this criteria. This criteria only says that remove only one. When we say remove only one, it's pretty straightforward that any criteria that we specify here, that document will be deleted. But if you want to delete the entire document, you will have to specify nothing. It's pretty simple as that. db.mycall.remove and it will remove everything, and then we can cross confirm by using find method. It will list nothing. So we are done with our basic level of MongoDB. In the next lectures, in the next videos, what we will be seeing, we will be covering the intermediate level of MongoDB, and then once we cover our intermediate level, we will jump towards the advanced level. And once we are done with all the three, the basic, intermediate and the advanced, we will be jumping towards our aggregation framework, which is an important framework for data analytics or for any of the machine learning engineer who are new to the job of the machine learning or who have been practicing machine learning for more than maybe 2, 3, 4 or 5 years, 6 years. An aggregation framework is very important to know. So till then, thank you all. Thank you for joining. If you like my video, please like it and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.